Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Secretary, has this meeting been advertised according to law?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it has.
Joan, roll call, please.
Mr. Diablo?
Here.
Mr. Newton?
Here.
Mr. Travisano?
Here.
Mr. Palando?
Here.
Mr. Caboni?
Here.
Mr. Delina?
Here.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick? Here.
First order of business is approval of minutes from prior meetings held on 7/12/18, 9/27/18, and 10/25/18. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion, we approve on roll call.
Second motion.
Roll call.
Mr. Diablo?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Mr. Travisano?
Yes.
Mr. Palando?
Yes.
Mr. Caboni?
Yes.
Mr. Delina?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick?
Yes, with the exception of 1025, I reviewed the minutes but was not present at the meeting.
Next order of business, 6A, authorization for payment of bills non-NL, that's A through E. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion, we approve on roll call vote.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Diablo?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Mr. Travisano?
Yes.
Mr. Palando?
Yes.
Mr. Caboni?
Yes.
Mr. Delina?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick?
Yes,
Next order of business, 6B, authorization for payment of bills NL related non-escrow to be paid when funds are available, and that's letter F. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion, we approve on roll call vote.
Second motion.
Roll call.
Mr. Diablo?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Mr. Travisano?
Yes.
Mr. Palando?
Yes.
Mr. Caboni?
Yes.
Mr. Delina?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick?
yes,
Next order of business is 6C, authorization of payment of bills to be paid from escrow accounts, to be paid only if escrow funds are available, and that's G and H. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion, we approve on roll call vote.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Diablo?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Mr. Travisano?
Yes.
Mr. Palando?
Yes.
Mr. Caboni?
Yes.
Mr. Delina?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kilpatrick?
yes.
Next is pending matters, waterfront redevelopment project.
Mr. Chairman, if we could flip waterfront with Gillette, we're waiting for a projector to come in. It should be in a few minutes.
Okay, Gillette?
I'm up.
Yes.
Just by way of introduction, Mr. Wisniewski is here representing AMS, and they propose to take over the Gillette project, and so he's here to make the preliminary presentation about qualifications, financial wherewithal, and address some issues. I doubt the agency's going to, I don't think the agency's going to make any decision today, but we want to put you on the record and get everything done that we can today.
Absolutely, Mr. Ambrosio. Thank you. John Wisniewski, Wisniewski & Associates. I represent AMS Equities, the contract purchaser of the project known as Gillette Towers LLC. As the members are aware, that project is a two-building project. One of the two buildings is complete. The other building has not yet been completed. There's not even a pad site. It's prepared, but it's not built. My clients are here pursuant to paragraph 21 of the redevelopment agreement, which says that any transfer of development rights, which the sale would entail, has to be reviewed and approved by the redevelopment agency. I had communicated with the executive director and your council, I believe it was perhaps in September initially, to get a sense on what type of information the agency would like to see in order to make that decision. What we have prepared and provided to you, and I'm sure that it was sent to you in your packet, but we provided an updated version this evening on your desk. The brochure is a summary of the most relevant projects that my client has undertaken. It's 40 pages, and they are here, and they can answer any questions you may have about that. There's also a commitment letter that indicates that they are in possession of a letter of intent, probably is a fairer way to describe it, to loan them $14 million, which I believe $8 million is for the purchase of the site, and $6 million of that 14 is to construct the second building. There are a couple of things that in the process of initially contacting Mr. Ambrosio and Mr. Baker about this, that has come up through my client's due diligence in the transaction. There are a number of items that could technically be called items of default that perhaps may not be meaningful or might be meaningful, but because we're in the process of obtaining financing, as you could appreciate, some of our financial partners may see a technical event of default, and we wanted to address those and ask the commission, the agency, to cure them. And there's a letter outlining them. There are things like quarterly reports. We don't have a record of whether or not there were faithfully quarterly reports. The agreement says that if quarterly reports are not made, it's an event of default, and the agency, in the event of default, can withdraw the developer rights. And so we wanted to make sure that when my client moves forward with this transaction, that any of those technical items are deemed cured. I'm aware, I don't have any documents, but my information tells me that there were two issues that the agency may have already addressed. One which is the timing of the completion of Building 2. The original agreement has the date of completion for Building 2 in December of this year. I am not a contractor, but I can assure you that that will likely not happen in the next month. And so I understand that that's already been addressed, or is at least under consideration by the agency. And the other issue is providing the amenities. In the agreement, it says that the amenities should not wait till the end of the project. One of the concerns, however, is the amenities, bocce, shuffleboard, is situated immediately behind the building that is yet to be built. And so if the client were to be required to provide the amenities first, it is likely those amenities would be damaged or perhaps even undone in the construction of the second building. And then the last issue is, in our review of documents, we had submitted to the borough a request for the documentation so that we could verify the change in age. And so we have a copy of the resolution from the redevelopment agency changing the redevelopment agreement from age 62 to 55. That agreement refers to borough ordinance. The only borough ordinance that I've been able to obtain through a request to the clerk's office is an ordinance that says in its preamble that the planning board has approved age 55, but then in the text of the ordinance, it says the age is 62. Now, there may be another ordinance that the clerk's office may not be able to locate or not aware of, and so I wanted to raise it to the agency because you may possess greater information about exactly what ordinance that was, whether it was in fact done, but obviously, if it really wasn't done, there are some issues that then need to be corrected because age 62 is not the basis upon which they entered into the contract. I think I've covered and summarized the issues that we'd like to have the agency consider. I have brought with me Avi Abadi, Rafi Mitnick, and Brian Tierney. Avi and Rafi are with AMS Equities. Brian is our architect, and he will be responsible for actually building the uncompleted building. And if the members have any questions about anything that's been submitted or things that I have not covered, I'd be happy to answer them, or to the extent that they have the ability, they'll answer it for you.
Any questions from the commissioners? Professionals?
Do we have any questions about the qualifications first?
As far as the ordinance goes, that's not us. You're going to have to go to the council or contact the borough attorney to see what they did. I mean, you know it's not us.
No, I'm not suggesting it is, but
Yeah.
you may be aware of a different ordinance because the resolution that the agency passed said based on the borough ordinance, but when I asked the clerk's office, the only one I got was one that frankly doesn't make it age 55, it makes it age
I
62.
mean, you're going back quite a few years. Even if we were aware of discussing it, whether they passed it or not, that's going to be information you're going to have to get from the borough attorney.
Fair point.
Okay, so there doesn't appear to be questions on credentials then, as far as this?
No, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, then, does anyone have any questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman, on the questions that were raised specifically by Mr. Wisniewski. Basically, a lot of most of the questions seem to go to issues of basically amending deadlines so that they're not walking into a default situation, which the agency will have to consider and get advice of counsel on as far as that goes.
Right. And conceptually, you can say, okay, what was passed is passed. Going forward, if you choose to approve it, you have to keep with the agreement. But that's sort of what the request is.
And I think the agency would also be very concerned about moving forward in an expeditious fashion. That would be something that, anything that anyone that you may have here who may address that issue, that may be worthwhile to,
Timing.
you know, the timing of it, how quickly you can move forward, and assuming these issues are worked out.
Did the other thing, the last one that we did do for the many of these,
Yeah.
they're supposed to be done within 2 years,
Yeah.
even if
And
the
the
building
building.
isn't built.
Yeah, yeah, we did that.
When, Mr. Wisniewski, when
Yeah.
will they start?
Yeah.
You know, if it's approved, when will you,
Okay, so-
start construction?
Fair question, so we have to close first.
Okay.
One of the items as a predicate to us actually closing is receiving this agency's approval. We're not going to close without that. Once we're closed,
It would start, would start immediately.
Between 12 and 18 months.
to finish.
Yeah. to
12 and
finish.
18 months to finish
To
the
finish the
project?
project.
Well, why don't we start with the closing? Let's assume like a month from now you have,
Yeah, a
we've
month.
ironed out the issues with the agency.
Sure.
What are we looking at in terms of a closing, which I think then sets up the rest of it as far as timeframe?
Within 30 days
Yeah,
of approval.
30 days around there.
Even with the weather, going into the colder weather?
No, I'm sorry, so
Closing.
miscommunication.
Right.
I think they're talking
Oh,
about
okay, the close?
closing
Oh, okay.
title
Right.
within 30 days of receiving agency approval.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah,
Right,
so-
yes.
Yeah.
And the
Then-
construction timeline, that's why we say 12 to 18 months. You
Okay.
never know what type of issues because of the weather that might come up, of course.
Okay, so closing within like, say, 30 days or thereabouts. and
After
then-
approval,
After the approval,
after your approval.
right. And then after that, a 12 to 18-month timeline?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
And John, just for Joan who's taking minutes, if your client could identify himself so she gets it right.
Sure.
Avia Vadi?
You're gonna have to spell that.
Oh, yes. A-V-I, last name A-B-A-D-I-E.
It's easier than Wisniewski.
Do you have the contractor? You're the owner?
Good.
Brian, B-R-I-A-N. Any questions? T-H-I-B-R-N-E-Y.
You already told me.
We're gonna have to miss the other session.
Yeah.
I just said we'll live here.
Yeah.
Well, we just got this.
And we'll go over an executive session, sorry.
And you're also an
And
owner?
then we can do a resolution.
Yeah, I don't give them a hard time.
I'm the head of
They
design.
look like they're prestigious.
We can have someone executive there.
Yeah.
And
If there's any questions.
just so the record's clear, the client's name is AMS. As you're probably familiar, most developers create single-purpose entities for each project. This is no different, and if you look on the copy of the financing letter, that actually states the name of the entity to which we would be asking the transfer of developer rights go to, which is 100 Kennedy Drive, Sayreville, AMS LLC. Very easy to remember names.
So, will you be keeping the same name, Gillette Towers, or do you expect to change that?
Haven't come to a final decision on that
Or
yet.
what if we like Gillette Towers?
If you like it, you get the camera.
Just so you know, and for the commissioners that weren't here at the time when this first came before us, the whole idea of going down to 55 was we don't want any kids in the school, so no one on the agency at that time really had a problem with 55. If one person was 55 and one person wasn't, usually the kids are out of school already. That's our biggest concern. From an economic standpoint, we want to see a positive cash flow out of this project. That's why at the time we recommended to the council that this particular project be 55 and over.
Right.
Whether they adopted it or passed the ordinance, your attorney's gonna have to do his due diligence and check with the borough attorney. For the commissioners that weren't here, we were all okay with
Right,
it, and that's why we did it.
Yeah, and we have a copy of the resolution that you did, the agency did, approving 55, and a copy of the resolution the planning board did approving 55.
Also, they're all one bedrooms.
Right, I mean, we actually don't, we don't get to make the law. We just recommend to the council that they do it.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's two other issues that we have to go through and take care of. Also, one is that there's supposed to be a deed of easement provided for the roadway in the back, because this is a redevelopment area and there's some other property that is landlocked, and the agency always wanted to make sure that that landlocked or limited landlocked property was able to go through and get access. So our recommendation is that with the closing, they also file a deed of easement that allows access to adjoining properties through that roadway. I think the other issue was raised by Commissioner Travisano at the time of approval, and that was that with all the drawings that were provided, Rennie wanted to go through and make sure that the front of the building looked like it was also had a formal entranceway.
I remember that.
The resolution of approval said that they were supposed to provide us plans that showed that. They've provided a number of different plans. They never provided that plan that showed it, but Gillette did construct it, okay, so that it looks more of a formal entranceway than the flat top drawing that was presented. So I give you that for your information. One only other dilemma and is that some of the gingerbread that was supposed to be on this building is not actually on the building. I'm not surprised necessarily from the standpoint, because Mr. Gillette had a way of doing that during construction. So I just pass it on. There was some frills that were supposed to be on a couple of the towers.
Is that what gingerbread means? I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know.
So I'll just circulate that. I think it may be too late to go through and do anything about it, but it's something that you should be aware of, so I'll just pass that around. But the good news is that he did modify the entranceway to provide the canopy over it to make the back of the building look more like the front of the building. And I just wanted to fill you in, because I think those were two other items that Mr. Baker spoke to me about.
So if I may, I can address those. I had spoken with Mr. Ambrosio, and I think I spoke to Mr. Baker about this as well. We would be prepared to have a deed of easement dedicating, I think it's a 30-foot right-of-way, but whatever's on the planning board plans.
Sure.
So that is done at the time of closing. And we would, not object to that be one of the conditions that you put in your approving resolutions, should you so decide to do that. I know that I looked through my notes, I know that there was a color rendering that was sent of the front.
That's what I'm circulating
Yeah.
now, but.
I don't know, are you saying that's not sufficient and you'd like something more?
No, what I'm saying is the color rendering that was sent, okay, did not address Commissioner Travisano's request, okay? But Mr. Gillette did take care of it, okay, in the actual construction.
Sure. So I guess the question is to satisfy the concern you raised, Mr. Samuels, do you want modified drawings, or?
I think that's up to the board. I mean, from my standpoint, I am happy that they addressed Mr. Travisano's concern. It was put on, but technically it didn't go through the protocol it was supposed to. So in that particular instance, it's up to the board to decide what they want done.
And then in terms of the gingerbread, I would defer to the people who know more about the construction aspects. I'm not sure if that could even be addressed at this point in time on the existing building. And do you want the other building to not be consistent with the first building?
I think that that is a question that you guys are gonna have to evaluate. And if it turns out that you don't want to construct it in accordance with the renderings that were provided, you probably should come back and say exactly how you're gonna construct it.
The new building.
The new building.
I think they're fine constructing the new building exactly as the renderings exist, that you have.
But you will have two different looking buildings.
So that's the question. We're open to doing what you're looking to have done.
I mean, I passed it, I think it looks
What I'm
nice.
saying is,
I don't have.
that is a architectural issue that I think your client has to address. It doesn't have to be addressed tonight. And if he wants to do it differently than the renderings, specifically to match the existing buildings, he has to request that out of the board, and the board will take the appropriate action.
We're gonna have to look at that.
Yeah, it seems.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to put you on the spot today, that's why I'm
No,
saying
no,
this.
no, and it's a fair point. I guess what my mission is that for the client's sake, they would like to have this addressed as expeditiously as possible. So that's why I just said, you know, how does the commission, how does the board feel
Well,
about
what's missing, Dave?
two
What's
different
missing?
buildings?
If you see on the drawings that I just gave to you, there were some frills on the top of the tower, some fluting that is not there, it's just straight
Is it possible to
siding.
put it on, Dave, at
I-
the later, at,
I don't know that it has to be put on.
no,
It's,
could it be put on?
the answer is anything can happen, yes, it could be put on. Is it materially a problem if it's not put on? No, it's a matter of your architectural preference.
And if we put it on the other building and not on the front, would there be?
It's gonna look weird.
It's gonna look weird.
It's gonna look weird,
I
so.
passed those buildings, it looks nice.
So if the building's acceptable to the board, then I'm not trying to make it an issue, I'm trying to say.
I understand what you're saying.
Maybe a couple.
This is the
Yeah,
fluting.
couple people will fit right
Of the tower.
Yeah, we'll discuss it in executive and then we'll
Yeah.
give you guidance.
John, we'll discuss that issue in executive session, and then if you, somebody wants to stick around afterwards, come out and give you some direction.
Okay.
I think it looks nicer without it.
Without it?
It looks kind of strange. Well, I can't tell the material from here, but.
So I guess I.
Oh, it's copper and bronze, I'm sure.
I thought it was
Oh,
gold
leaf.
gold and platinum.
I just don't think it matches.
So what I'm hearing from the client is the request is,
Always
if
gonna
we could
look
build the
nice.
second building like the first building, so that would be without the gingerbread, the fluting, the frills, that would be the request. Obviously, that's your decision, you can let us know.
I think the expedition to get the thing done is the good. It looks nice.
Sign of that is missing.
You asked for the front door, Randy.
Yeah, they fixed the door.
Randy, you got your front door with the old one.
Well, maybe, Mr. Chairman, we could get some more amenities in lieu of not putting them. What is the, Mr. Architect, what's the cost of
I think
that?
they'll put the gingerbread up.
Take it down.
I mean, I think that in terms of just making it simple, one building is built, and this is, don't forget, the second building is the smaller of the two buildings. So the larger massing doesn't have it. It would seem to make sense that the smaller building should be identical.
more visible.
Yeah, and the other building's more visible. And those were decisions that we frankly we couldn't control. That was decisions that were made.
I understand.
And you understand, there were health issues and other things that went on, so.
So if we get to closing, you know, and you do this right away, the payment to the Gillettes would take you guys how long?
In the closing.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
No,
covers
it'll be
it.
done at closing.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
that'll be
closing.
closing,
Yeah.
yeah, all right, that'll be a closing,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
30
days?
roughly 30 days after we get some document from the agency saying the transfer of development rights is approved.
Okay, is that good? Anyone else have any questions?
You told me the exit, Mr.
You did.
Which way does that work?
Okay.
Okay.
And one of my clients just arrived, he was stuck in tunnel traffic, Michael Mitnick.
Yeah, Mike Mitnick here, sorry, my apologies.
All right. You're done, so you can leave.
I'll take your traffic again. Hey, of course, a little warm.
Any other questions?
Nah, and if somebody wants to stick around, they can, or I can call
I
you.
suggest
Joe or
Nick
I'll
stays
call you.
around.
Okay. Tardy, yeah, you got it.
Mike wants you to stay
For the
now.
next one.
Mike wants you to stay.
Okay, all right, let's do waterfront.
Thank you very much.
I gotta get stuck going the other
Right
way
on
for the
time.
tunnels.
I get this excited.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right,
You just
take
said
care.
that, now you gotta go
Have a good night.
to
You also.
Thank you. Where are you setting up here?
Thank you very much.
Right you're on.
I'm gonna put it up on the wall.
Yeah, I'm gonna show.
Can't push hand last year. You had to move.
Ready, you have a big veteran.
Luckily, there's a lot of open seating.
What's that? Not anymore. When I was growing up, you had one. That's garden friends. Right, but most of the kids, most of the kids. Zerba went to South Riverside.
Now that's all changed
That's
unfortunately.
yeah, church, yeah.
Hey, Joe, you want these for
My
remote?
family, they still want a tree of life inside. Sure. No, you like that, hold on.
I like to hold on to things, you know me, Joe.
My kid, my associate Ryan, was the councilman
I like this one
from
better.
the office.
I like the new one better.
Not huge, but.
Are you worked on?
It's an architectural lesson.
I like them.
All right, okay, what's up, Mike?
Always has a.
He's zapping you. Yes, the other way, the other left.
Everybody.
There you go, you got him. Mr. Chairman, there's plenty of seating.
One hand wash the other.
That's
Two
just-
hands wash the
Mr. Chairman, Rosetta Stadium.
You never heard that one?
No, no signature.
Is that, it's still on here.
See what happens.
That was-
Look at
Gotta make that bigger.
That's the three B's of mother dog.
Yeah, so I'm gonna zip over to the
That was a-
wake and
that
then
was
drive to
a
Atlantic City.
costume change worthy of Broadway right there. Thank you so much for your help.
Give me a call.
I'll bring it back.
I'll bring it back.
I'll bring it back.
I'll be in the office.
Okay, good, thanks, Greg.
I'm in a good mood today.
I know, I can't imagine why.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Six.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, great, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What did I say?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, gentlemen, thank you for inviting us to attend tonight. Kevin Polston from North American Properties on behalf of Riverton. I'm accompanied by counsel Paul St. Ange from Gibbons. I'd like to take some time tonight to update you on the activities that have taken place since I was last here in February. I've certainly seen many of you around town over the last several months, but this is our first formal appearance in front of the board since February 22nd. And a lot's been happening, so. When we were here in February, we discussed this new concept plan, and the board was kind enough to give us preliminary approval to move forward in this direction with the plan. The basic concept of the plan, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's his kid, Limbo's here. That's his granddaughter.
Here we go. Okay, the basic concept of the plan, you see the entrances, the new parkway entrances here off of Chevalier and Peter Fisher. The basic concept was to bring these entrances in through a traditional retail or power center configuration. This is the Bass Pro building here. Just for a point of reference, this is the Faith Fellowship Ministries existing church. And so these areas here, traditional retail, surface parked, some big box, some highway services along the frontage along the interchange. This portion here is a mixed-use village with this Main Street concept here with apartments over retail, office over retail, more office over retail, hotel convention center. You see these gray boxes here are parking garages supporting this density, this high density format along the water with a waterfront plaza with primarily food and entertainment uses along this waterfront. A marina in the Raritan, and townhomes along the water flanking both sides of this mixed-use core. Going further north up Parcel C, this was a grid. This was designed as a grid to allow development of flexible uses. What's shown here is apartment blocks, townhome blocks. In the blue is office. And obviously, we have water quality detention facilities servicing this area as it drains toward the river. Parcel B was reflected 1 million square feet of commercial space. This was quite candidly a placeholder design just to show a density model for the purpose of allowing us to study the market and study the site a little bit more so we can figure out what that would represent over time. So totals, project totals under this plan, 1.5 million square feet of retail, approximately 2 million square feet of office and commercial space other than retail, 800,000 square feet of hotel, the marina, and 2,000 residential units. As a point of reference, the zoning for the project, the waterfront redevelopment plan, does not cap commercial density. Obviously, the residential density is capped, and so we look at these commercial components as somewhat flexible, but we spent a lot of time this year trying to figure out what does the market tell us those things want to be today, and how do we design something that gives us flexibility to meet the market as it evolves over time. So what have we been doing this year? We've been involved in remediation activities. Certainly the remediation has been ongoing. Physical work is still underway, although it's, I would say, reaching its closing stages after the 10 years in process. And you've seen some site activities. We'll look at some photos of work that's been going on the past three and a half months. Excuse me. We've been going through diligence, understanding the site, understanding the market, understanding the regulatory environment, both locally and at the state level applicable to this project. We've been through many iterations of planning and design particularly as we study the site and understand how to coordinate the environmental remediation with our market-driven plan. We've been in the leasing and sales activity. We have a team of 5 leasing people who are traversing the country, literally, talking to retailers, food and beverage operators, entertainment concepts, and operators in other categories such as hotel, office, and medical office facilities. We've also talked to single-family home developers and other people that we would look to partner with to develop this project over time. We've been working with Bass Pro Shops to restructure their lease based on the passage of time, based on some changes in the way their buildings will be constructed, they're excited about the opportunity. We're excited about having them. Those conversations are ongoing. And we've spent a lot of time going through economic modeling, understanding construction pricing, in concept what these buildings might cost, what kind of market rents, market sales, what the cost would be to develop the site from the remediation forward. And we spent quite a bit of time this year addressing affordable housing issues with the borough, and we've reached the pending settlement of those issues, which will be, we will appear in court next Friday for a final endorsement of the settlement agreement that was reached with the borough. So we've had a lot of activity ongoing this year. Even though you haven't seen us, we've been working away. This is a photograph that was taken about 4 weeks ago. And what this shows, this is looking north. Oh, excuse me. I'm mixing up my red and my move. Okay, so this is looking north across the site. And what you see here is a surcharge zone. And I'm going to regress for a minute. I know many people in this room have been working on this project for a lot longer than I have. In fact, it's been just over a year for me, and I remember the first week I was hearing these terms PDM and surcharge. And what is PDM and what is surcharge? Surcharge, is that something that's on my hotel bill? But PDM, processed dredge material, as most of you know, this site is substantially comprised of processed dredge material. Dredge spoils that are treated with some sort of cementatious product to give them some stability. They're tested and then they're brought on site to fill the site. This material is very soupy. It dries out over time and becomes crusty, but it's still very soft in the middle. Our engineers have described it as somewhat like toothpaste. When toothpaste cakes up, it has kind of a hard surface, but you press on it and it has a lot of give. So you really can't develop on that material unless you prepare it for site work. And so what has happened here, this pile, which actually extended at one point all the way down here, is about 22 feet high, and that has been sitting there for about 2 years, compressing the dredge that's underneath it so that it stabilizes enough that we can build parking lots and streets on it. buildings in this zone, and the surcharge zone, we'll look at a more specific map, but the surcharge zone basically runs across the site this way, so from this point north, these areas have to be surcharged in order to handle site improvements. It's a total of about 108 acres. This site that was originally covered to create the Bass Pro parking lot was about 25 acres, and we're working on another 25-acre site right here, and we'll see a different picture of that to show what's going on. But the surcharging activity, the preparation of the site, of this 25-acre site, takes about 6 months, and then another 6 to 12 months for the compression of that soil material sitting on top to actually remove the moisture from the soil and stabilize it so that it can be constructed on. This is another view of this site. This is showing this 25-acre site. The first thing that's done is quarry materials are brought in to stabilize the site and to create drainage layers. Wicks are put in which allow water to evacuate the material as it's being compressed, and then material is brought in and spread in 4-inch lifts on top of that prepared surface to compress it, and then when the surcharging is done, that overburden is removed. And you can see, it gives you some idea of this ridge right here, this 22-foot ridge, where materials are being brought here to execute on the surcharging activities on this 25-acre zone. So we roll this material to this zone, and then once this one stabilizes, we'll continue to move through the site. And I'll show you a map that indicates what that involves. But just for an order of magnitude, this is a 25-acre project, and it's about a $13+ million, $13.5 million activity. So that's been going on since August, and the preparation and installation will be completed in February, and the stabilization will be about a year after that. I'm going to go back to the beginning. This is one of the things we try to study is what is this site. We know it's a cumulative area of about 418 acres. As you all know, I believe the Parcel A was deeded to the county and state for permanent green space. The remedial capping of that site was complete in April, and I actually walked out on the site with some of the engineers from CME and some of our environmental consultants. There are a lot of migratory birds out there. It was kind of an interesting environment out there in the marsh. But that's permanent green space for the benefit of the citizens of this area. Parcel B is nominally about 50+ acres. It's really developable to about 40 acres. There's no current access into that site. The Amboy Cinema site here to the south actually has access to 35 and 9, but this is a landlocked site and it's all dredge material. So we look at that as a future development opportunity, but it's quite some time down the road. It's not something that we've really focused a lot of time on, other than to say, okay, how might it be developed? And if in X number of years, and at that time, what do we anticipate that the market might give us on that site? So we spent really our effort over this past 8 to 10 months focused on Parcel C and how do we get this project formulated for long-term success while expediting as much as possible a construction start given the physical condition of the site. We went through an exercise that I found very useful in studying what we call a constraints plan on Parcel C. So this is a site plan that's somewhat progressed from what I showed you from February. It's not quite what we have to show you a little later in the presentation as our current working plan. But we took our plan and we said, okay, what is it that is involved in this site that impacts our ability to develop these uses, particularly the residential, because of the environmental remediation constraints. There are areas that really can't be used for residential. But the first restriction that we laid on this site plan is the 1,000-foot setback from the water plant under the MCUA agreement. And so no residents by contract and by ordinance, no housing can be put in that zone. That's about 100 acres of the site. We have environmental, physical constraints in this lower area here, what I call the tail of the project. This is the landfill and lagoon area. This outline right here is the landfill where all the buildings on site were demolished and buried. And these areas here are lagoon areas that provided drainage basically for the whole site. So there's a lot of environmental impact down here, and very costly to try to develop that land, and it's somewhat challenged just from the dimensions of being along the river and sitting between the river and the MCUA plant next door. These black areas are areas that are being remediated, either are being remediated or have already been remediated and closed out to commercial-only standards. So between those two areas is about 140, approximately 140 acres of additionally impacted land. We talked about the surcharge activities and the surcharge requirements. It's about 180 acres of land. I showed you this area, surcharge 1, that was done some years ago, and we're moving material over to this surcharge area 2. Those two together are about half, about 50 acres of the 108. To roll through, we recycle the material because moving that material is very costly. So you don't want to import a bunch of material that you then have to move out. So we go through this in a phasing where we use material here, it compresses, we lose some of the material in the compression process, and then we take the overburden and move it to the next site. So we recycle that surcharge burden into the other areas. And so while once we have that area where it's been surcharged and it's stable for site work, it still has to be, we still have to install extraordinary subgrade structure for buildings, typically piles for buildings. There's an extraordinary cost of building buildings in that area even once we've surcharged it. And once again, that cost is about $550,000 an acre for surcharging. So when we combined all those constraints, we said, oh, well, there's very limited parts of this project where we can do what we call traditional development, but it led us to some ideas on site plan. And this is the working version of the latest site plan. We're not asking for any kind of approval on this plan right now. It's still very much a working plan. But we are working toward finalizing this as the version of the plan that we will come back in for approval as a phasing plan. And as the concept plan moving forward. I'll do some comparisons in just a minute about the physical components as well as the component parts, the numbers. But just to outline where we are right now, once again, very similar design to what we had here with the traditional retail and with a mixed-use village. Some of the townhome areas have been impacted based on some environmental and geotechnical constraints about this area down here that we've decided to use it for water quality ponds rather than trying to get it to a residential standard for development. The yellow, just to walk through the uses. So the yellow indicates apartments. It's shown here in 5 blocks. We probably will end up being 6 blocks of apartments, about 1,500 units. The tan, the light tan and dark tan are townhomes. So those are just different types of townhomes. Some of them are 3-level townhomes, some of them are stacked 2 over 2. And so you see those collected in neighborhoods along the mixed-use core, in neighborhoods through phase 3. And then the blue, once again, is office along the central core of the project here. We've progressed the plan on parcel B. We like this concept plan. It pulls back away from the water. The dredge material is deeper the further north we get, so it's very expensive to develop out here compared to here. It's still expensive here, but it's just more technically challenged the further north we go. We also have the bridges that rise on both sides of parcel B, so the idea of pulling back where we have a lower visual impediment. We've put parking garages on the outside, the perimeter of the site, to help with noise and to help with sight lines. And we're looking at, this is a combination of 4 office buildings with incidental retail on the ground floor and a hotel, conference center facility. This is a concept, admittedly, this parcel is probably 10 years down the road before we get to any kind of development activity, because this parcel C, there's a lot to be absorbed. But it's a very similar count. The density has dropped a little bit, primarily in retail, and that's just a function of what we're trying to accomplish in retail and what the retail market is today. Just to clarify, when I say retail, people think of buying shoes, buying clothes, but retail in this context means retail, entertainment, food and beverage, services, personal services, a lot of experience-based commercial businesses. The cross-hatching, just to clarify, these areas that are cross-hatched on this plan are areas where retail is on the ground floor and something else is above. So you have some of that in this building and some of that here. So the February plan versus the October plan, and this is dated October 15th, that was when this initial plan came out, and we probably will have a final version of this in December. But as you can see, the layout is very similar. We've reconfigured the blocks to the north. This is what we call phase 3. The blocks have changed shape. Number 1 for efficiency, but number 2 to recognize and acknowledge the restrictions on residential development. So there's some areas like this block right here. It should naturally be a residential area, but it's closed out for commercial only. So that obviously has driven a lot of our plan. And you see, once again, we progressed parcel B from just a highly conceptual plan into something that we have more confidence in would be a physically pleasing setup. Going by the numbers, the comparison between the February plan and the October plan, slightly less retail, about the same amount of other commercial, slightly less hotel, although I'll tell you that I think that these two categories, the office commercial and the hotel, these will be interchangeable. I'll talk about the flexibility of the plan in our next set of slides. We're still showing 400 slips on the tally. That's a very large marina, and the phase, we'll show the numbers, and what we're considering the phase 2 would be maybe an 80 slip marina and still 2,000 residential units. To compare this plan to the previously approved general development plan, and I believe that was approved in 2015, before our time, but just pulling the historical records, and the differences that you will see in the basic concept are the approved GDP had a residential neighborhood, had a similar, what I'll call traditional retail area up front, was anchored from a retail standpoint by a very large mall, 1.3 million square feet as I recall. And parcel B was primarily big box retail. The traffic circulation, the GDP contemplates traffic being brought in, and these curved roads provide a high-speed, basically a high-speed access to the northern part of the state where the retail density was concentrated. Our plan addresses the retail in a different way. We have this traditional retail, and then we have about 500,000 square feet of retail uses in this mixed-use village. This, to us, creates the place. And for those of you who read our March presentation, you've seen some of what we've done in other places in the country. I'll show you a few images tonight to indicate what this place may feel like. And to us, creating this area of activity, serving the commuters and the traffic of the parkway, but then creating this destination where people can interface with the water and they can be in an environment that we feel is really unique to Central Jersey, if not all of New Jersey, creates an opportunity for a long term, these blocks to be whatever the market tells us they want to be, subject to the environmental constraints. And then obviously this parcel B plan is a more dense plan than was shown in this prior iteration. These blocks, this is, for example, this block right here, it's shown as office right now with a gray. That gray is a garage parking parking deck. That block may be a hotel block. We don't know. The market will tell us once we get this built and we see who shows up to try to become part of this community. That's the way the plan is built, with flexibility, as opposed to a mall, which is to me a go or no go. You either build the mall or you don't build the mall. These things can be absorbed over time. This is a project that will take many, many years to complete. as the market dictates demand. And then the roadways, you see, we've kind of shortened the roadway to connections to the north to get people to the north, but we don't have as significant a roadway. The roadways throughout the project are not as significant. This is really a pedestrian-friendly zone, and it's designed as such. These parking garages are intended to keep people, rival sequences. You would turn here, you would turn into this garage, you would turn here, turn into this garage, or come here and get into this garage to go to the movie theater, for example, rather than having a bunch of parking in the front of the buildings. There is some teaser parking there. We'll look a little bit more specifically at some changes in this area of the plan. As you see, this curvature here versus this traditional intersection here. So the approved plan shows a slip ramp coming in off the parkway. So you would come off the parkway and never go through a red light and curve around the building, merge with traffic coming in the Chevalier. So there's 2 lanes of traffic going probably 50+ miles an hour, and merging with the traffic that's coming across Chevalier or from other points of access to this roadway. So there's a lot of activity going on right here with vehicles. And you'll notice there's no sidewalk. This is a very pedestrian unfriendly environment. And it's just a huge road. Because of this weave, because of these 2 lanes of traffic coming together and then merging with these 2 lanes of traffic, you can't get to the west of the site until all the way up here, because of the danger of people trying to get across to get over. So by moving to a more traditional intersection and removing the slip ramp, we've been able to eliminate 2 lanes of traffic in this section of road and 2 lanes of traffic in this section of road. We've enabled people to come in off Chevalier and make a left here to get into the western part of this block. And we've also been able to move the Bass Pro building south and east to create a zone for pedestrian activity here, a sidewalk corridor. And we've picked up some land on this side of the road to enhance development capability to the west, all the way up and down this north-south corridor. So to us, there are a lot of benefits to this move in the plan. One thing that you'll see here, this is the billboard that's shown right here. By moving this building, we're changing these roads and moving this building, we have a conflict with the billboard, and we've started discussions with the professional staff about pursuant to the redevelopment agreement, to negotiate a buyout of that billboard so that we can demolish it to accomplish this site plan. Phasing, general phasing. This is what I'll call pretty lumpy phasing. This is 4 phases, but I will assure you that within each phase, there will be sub-phases that get delivered over time. But the first phase is this, the Bass Pro, because of the condition of this area, this is probably the first thing that gets started, although it will only start in conjunction with the rest of what's shown here in this blue area. This is not a transaction that can support financing on its own. It has to be delivered as part of a greater project. Phase 2 is the mixed-use core, as we talked about, with retail and office and hotel, apartments, office and retail, apartments and office over retail and hotel over retail, single-family townhomes. Once again, a lot of food and beverage and entertainment. This is a movie theater, and this is a live entertainment complex here. Phase 3 is primarily office and residential, and then phase 4 is office with incidental retail and hotel. Phase 1, contents. This is about a 755,000 square foot concentration of retail, including the Bass Pro at 200,000 square feet roughly. And it has one other use, which is a limited service hotel or hotels. It could be 2 units, or it could be, this is shown as a combined, what we call a dual flag. So you think of a Hampton Inn, Hilton Garden Inn sharing the same building, part of the Hilton family as representative. Not that that's what's going to be on this plan, but that would just be something you see in the marketplace that might represent that use. I'll point out that there is no residential in the first phase. We have a lot still to do, and we'll go over some of those things that we have to accomplish at the end of this presentation, but assuming we can get through those processes timely, and we can continue to capture the leasing activity that we've been generating over the past year and convert those to leases and get the buildings engineered. We intend to start this phase 1 late 19. It's about a 14-month construction schedule. The mixed-use village, phase 2. It's a smaller amount of area, but a much more significant amount of density because it's not surface parked, it's garage parked, and it's buildings in most cases that are multiple levels. So you have 500,000 square feet of retail, 281,000 square feet of office, and that office is contained here in one level over retail, which is what I would call creative loft office. Small users typically are going to be 1,500 to 3,000 square feet. There will be an 8-story office tower over this block, which would be larger corporate users. That's the 281,000 square feet of office space that's shown in the tabulation. Hotel and conference center in the purple here as the centerpiece of this area of the plan. As I mentioned, probably an 80-slip marina as a first phase, although we do have some challenges to get through with the marina, which I think you all are aware of, but this is just from a planning standpoint at this point. And the residential counts in this phase are 640 units in 2 blocks of apartments and approximately 80 townhomes. We're having some trouble getting the residential density on the plan, the 2,000 units. I showed you the constraints. We've got the counts to 2,000 when we went through and did some audits of buildings and the scale and how many apartment units we could actually get in and where are we losing townhome units because of environmental issues. We're down actually to about 1,800 and, 1,800 and change. We're about 150 units short right now. Part of the exercise we're going through over the next several weeks is trying to recapture that density. So I want to give you some orientation before I show you these images. This is, once again, this is the place. You see this is what I would call a Main Street environment. It's vertical. There's buildings of height on each side of this on each side of this road. And the imagery that I'll show you starts basically here, as if you were driving up to this point, where traffic will be encouraged. Vehicles will be allowed here, but vehicular traffic will be strongly encouraged with signs and with other physical configurations to force traffic to either side of this to get into these parking garages. Now, some people will invariably come down here and try to find a space, and they'll end up, for the most part, going through and coming back and finding a garage from the other direction. But having said that, so this is an image looking down that street. It's representative. Some things have changed. For example, this building right here shows 2 levels of office over the retail. This building is now 4 stories of apartments over the retail, just to try to pick up more residential density to try to meet the numbers. This is the office building that I described that sits over retail. This is actually 2-level retail facility, as is this. You see what we call jewel boxes down through the middle of the boulevard. And in the distance you see another apartment building and an end cap building down near the waterfront. Let me go back and show you where we are on the plan here. These next 3 images are actually photographs from our existing project in the Atlanta area. It's this area right here is the Village Green. So this is a movie theater, and it's flanked by retail and restaurant. A lot of restaurant activity actually in this area, outdoor seating. And this is our primary public gathering space within the project. It's used for summertime. It's a turf surface. This dimension is exactly the dimension you see on the plan that I just showed you. So in the summertime, it's used for organized events. I can tell you that it's a very popular area for families. The kids run around and just as far as from a break from shopping, and the kids can run around, expel some energy. And you see patio dining on both sides. These are restaurants that have their outdoor seating in this area here, the cinema, and obviously a fountain. This is a concert that's going on at this time. The front of that facility, this is a concierge station, and there's a valet drop here. So this is a big hub of activity. Here, this is the wintertime setup. We have a permanent conduit connections for the vendor who sets up the ice rink. They come in, they have all the infrastructure in place, they set it up seasonally, and it operates obviously on a more abbreviated schedule, and this is in the Atlanta area would here, but this is a really popular wintertime use of this space. And our biggest event of the year is our tree lighting and Santa's arrival, which will actually take place a week from Sunday, November 18th this year. And this is a very similar scale to what this Riverton plan is designed to. You see the 4 levels of residential over retail here, the people on their balconies enjoying the event. These are not all people that live on site. There are 860 some odd residential units on this site. This is probably 18 to 20,000 people that come from throughout the community to share this experience. It's hours of entertainment, capped by Santa's arrival, fireworks. It's really a popular event. And then lastly, I'm going to go back and give you once again an orientation. This final picture that you'll see is this area down here along the waterfront, what we consider a secondary public gathering space. It's a critical area for the food and beverage, the live entertainment. So there's going to be a lot of milling about, people in transition from an event to dinner, from dinner waiting for dinner. This is a food hall here, traditional restaurants. So this last image showing that area is this is not necessarily the building that will be built, but this is a design concept. But the idea of a valet drop at this end of the project as well to support the restaurants, a nice public gathering space along the water, that connects to the promenade, the waterfront promenade that runs all along the outside, the exterior of the site. So, having gotten to this point, what are our next steps? We are in the process of amending and restating the master redevelopment agreement that was executed in 2008. As this group knows, that document has been amended and supplemented many times over the years. There was a lot of negotiation and renegotiation and litigation and settlement. So we're condensing that document into a single document that for us, for the lenders and the other developers that will be involved, they can look to one place to understand what the redevelopment agreement says as of today moving forward. And we've been in discussions with the professional staff about that document, and we are prepared to deliver a draft of that document next week for review by the agency. We will be amending the waterfront redevelopment area plan. That's not as comprehensive a process. Specifically, there's a handful of use restrictions that we'd like to address based on some interesting opportunities that we have to bring some very desirable complementary uses to what we're doing on our plan. The revisions to the concept plan, I talked about continuing to iterate that plan. We'll ultimately take that plan and overlay phasing on it. We've started that process and started that conversation with the professional staff to show how the components are sequenced and how the amenities under the redevelopment agreement are delivered over time, as well as the infrastructure for the project, which is related to the pilot. We will be applying for a pilot, and we anticipate that application would occur in the next 6 weeks probably. We will be applying for an economic redevelopment growth grant at the state level through the EDA, and we will be continuing to explore our liquor license strategies. Most of you are familiar, obviously, with the New Jersey alcoholic beverage regulatory regime. I've mentioned a few times that this is an entertainment, food and beverage heavy mix. And so, for example, people that will be seeking to have alcoholic beverage licenses would be the movie theater, the live entertainment venue, bowling alley, hotel operations, in addition to traditional restaurants, full service and quick service restaurants. So that's something we're working with the staff on. We'll be working at the state level, and we will be, I'm sure, back before you to talk about some of those opportunities of how to arrive at the right number of licenses to support the mix of uses that we've proposed on the plan. So having said that, that brings us to the end of my formal presentation, and I've been talking a lot, I apologize, you've been listening very patiently, and I appreciate that. Happy to answer any questions, go back to any particular visuals to address any details. And if in anticipation, maybe I'll go back to a site plan, so if there's anything about the plan that anyone has questions about, we can address that. So.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, billboard. You say you're doing away with the billboard?
Yes, sir, we're gonna have to demolish the billboard in order to facilitate the new site plan.
That's ours, right?
That's all right.
So they'll have to negotiate a payment to us for that.
Yes, so the,
Fine,
Is that what
that's
we
where we get
want?
our,
So it's a revenue source, so they're talking about replacing the revenue source.
Are you talking about, are you concerned about a monthly thing?
sure.
Yeah, well,
It's-
that's
it's
obviously,
all- we should discuss it in executive
Yeah,
session, but
right.
yes, the idea is to replace the revenue source.
Okay.
so we acknowledge that that revenue is important to the mission of the agency. The redevelopment agreement does contemplate that the parties would negotiate in good faith for the redeveloper to take over the billboard if that's something that we want to do, and we need to do it for the site plan. So we certainly, and we've broached this topic with the professionals, and we're working on some ideas to replace that revenue.
Weren't we supposed to have two? There was supposed to be a second one?
It's all part of the discussion on revenue replacement. We'll fill you in during the executive session.
Anything else?
Being nothing else, I appreciate your
Well,
time.
as you're going through all the phases, you said you're gonna be having things like next week already planned or something, right? Who's gonna see that? Are we gonna see that, or just our professionals gonna see it?
The next plan. No,
Yeah.
we will be back here in December. I'm hoping that the plan, I have actually a design meeting tomorrow with our entire design team from around the country to go through some issues on this plan. I'll give you an example. So this is what, from here north, these areas are what I would call a cartoon. These are simply planning sketches. You'll notice that these buildings are different. They're hard, what we call hard lines. Those drawings have been dropped into CAD. Those are buildings that we are actually working to design from the standpoint of making sure that we can engineer the roads, we can engineer exactly how the buildings relate to the roads and the sidewalks. These are buildings that we are actively marketing to people right now. These areas to the north are still, ideas in our head that will be, and we need to refine. For example, we've engineered this road to this point right here, which would be the first phase of construction of this north-south road. But how it ties into this northern part, we really need to do some work on traffic in this area. Those are the types of things, Mr. Newton, that we continuing to iterate the plan. The basic concept is not going to change. We're going to be working on the detail of how it actually functions.
And before we can make any recommendations to the board, there are traffic studies that we have to go through and look at. Their traffic model has to go through and be presented to us. Those things haven't been done yet, so there are going to be ongoing meetings with their engineers and our office in order to go through and review the model, review how traffic movement is going through, and dimensions and technical aspects of the project before we make those presentations to the board.
In addition to several other subcommittee meetings.
Yeah,
with the
because
developer as well.
they're gonna change the master plan too, right? Part of it, they're gonna change things. in
Well,
the
they're gonna
master-
tweak it, okay?
Tweak is what
They're
I-
gonna do.
that's-
They're
there'll be
gonna
change.
ask for permission to do it.
Yeah, exactly, that's my point. It's like, I don't wanna come to a meeting and say, okay, we're voting on this tonight.
Not gonna happen, Don. I mean, there's,
December 13th is the next meeting, but I thought at the subcommittee meeting, we brought up that whatever meetings we needed to have from this time on, if it's special meetings that we're gonna have to have, and that's what we're gonna have to have. Because if they're gonna aggressively, get into this now and move forward because of the delays that we had, no matter whose was at fault or nobody at fault, they're ready to go. So no matter how many meetings we're gonna have to have, then we're gonna have to have them. That's
right.
That's it.
Mr. Chairman, we asked them to come in tonight to put on this presentation
Right.
because of the fact that you haven't seen them in a while, and because we wanted to bring the full board up to par from the standpoint of what we were seeing, so that we can go through and have a plan to go through and move forward.
It's all of these activities that we look at as next steps. We don't do any of these unilaterally. They all have to be
no, but
approved through the
that's,
agency.
I wanna drive that home too. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing's being done either unilaterally,
Yeah.
by that, they're highlighting and they're bringing up
Yeah.
areas that they, from their side, need work. We're pushing back on our side, but nothing is done until
No.
And
it gets before the
depending
agency.
upon what else is on the agenda is that if, you know, we felt that we needed a meeting with just Riverton versus having like we had tonight, and that's what we're gonna have, correct? That's
If
what
that-
we
if we
said
need-
at
sure,
the
right,
yeah.
subcommittee
Right, yeah.
meeting, because
Yeah.
that's how important it is now.
But it was also a logical time, the COA issue has been resolved, that was a big issue.
Right.
Now it's a lot of stuff that had been kinda held up, and now we're gonna move forward.
And these
so.
are the next steps that we gotta take care of,
Yeah.
and that's.
So
you
some
know,
of these actions, for example, anything that has to do with the waterfront redevelopment area plan, the zoning, is something that would go through this body as well as the council, the planning
And
board.
it's always been like that, it's
Yeah.
always gonna be like that.
Yep, so,
Till the light.
sorry.
all
Yeah,
right,
when
Jim.
you do the phasing plan, are you gonna put the timeframes in for when you think you're gonna be doing the projects and when they'll?
And the
Beginning
sequencing,
and
the sequencing will be laid out, and it will be laid out by block. It will be a fairly detailed phasing plan.
Because originally it was done, and we got a, when it had 10 phases, we had, everybody got something saying, this is what it's gonna be, this is what's gonna happen, this, you know, just so you all
So
know.
you're looking for the dates as it's
Oh, yeah,
phased?
no,
All right.
no.
All right,
Yes, they're intending to produce that, and that'll be
Yeah, yeah.
presented to the
all right,
commissioners.
so,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner.
thank you.
Okay, moving on. Have a motion to go into private session?
I make a motion to go into private session.
Second motion.